Welcome back to the Normie Review, where you get to see properties through the eyes of someone who is less than familiar with the source material. We're back to Ahsoka. Episode 4 is a bit of a mixed bag. Some of the little things that I was overlooking before are starting to compound, and they're starting to bug me more and more. This episode definitely has some high points. It's much better than episode 3, though that's not a really high bar you gotta jump over. I mean, so long as you're not shuffling, you can step over that bar. But let's talk about what's good and what's bad. First, the dialogue pauses are starting to get to me. This show is feeling like a 5-page paper, but you only had 3.5 pages of information. So, you would put the 2 spaces at the beginning of every sentence, maybe add more paragraphs than you need so you can indent more often. You have a whole conversation. Ahsoka will be like, we might face a difficult choice with that map. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. What do you mean? 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. If we can't find Ezra, 1 Mississippi. We may have to make sure no one can. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. What do you mean? This one doesn't look like Ahsoka, but I thought this one at least had Sabine's haircut. I'm working with what I have. These conversations just feel so dragged out, and it's becoming obvious that Disney demanded 8 episodes of at least 30 minutes each, because these last 2 have barely gotten over that mark. The insistence on padding these episodes is hurting the believability of the story as well. They have crashed on this planet. The enemy is dangerously close to completing this hyperspace jump loop. They should suspect that they're combing the forest searching for them at any moment. And yet the episode opens up with them trying various things to fix the ship, and Ahsoka having this long conversation about how the map and finding Ezra might need to be sacrificed if it means preventing the return of Thrawn. Now, that conversation was very important, and it was good foreshadowing that Sabine was obviously going to make the opposite choice, but the tone of the intro to the episode did not in any way suggest that they were on a ticking clock to stop the bad guys from doing the bad thing, or that they were most certainly being hunted. Another thing I'm noticing is the show structure, and I'm probably only noticing this because of the One Piece live action, which has excellent show structure, by the way. Ahsoka just feels like it picks up and leaves off wherever they feel like it. Shows made for streaming platforms are having a serious problem with this. It feels like they just write and film like a 6 or 8 hour movie, and then Netflix or whoever says, well, it needs to be 10 episodes, so they just cut it into 10 random parts. Doesn't really matter where they stop or start. This is not inherently bad. They're still telling a long story. You're still getting the point of it, but when you see a show like One Piece that has really good structure, and each individual episode or pair of episodes is telling a self-contained story in addition to the overarching narrative, it's jarring to see a show like Ahsoka where they just seem to stop and start at random with no real thought as to the story beats that are in each episode or how each episode works as a self-contained unit. So episodes 3 and 4 should have been combined, in my opinion, and edited down to about 45 minutes total. You've got one cohesive story there. They're tracking the tracker they put on the hyperdrive. They show up, there's some fighting. They get derailed, they land on the planet, they try to find the bad guys and stop them at the Stonehenge thing, but they fail, and it looks like the bad guys have won for now. That's an okay story. Now, episode 4 does end very, very well. This is a great place, good halfway point for the season as a whole. We've got a great cliffhanger here. The map has been destroyed. They took Sabine. It seems like they got away. A bunch of action happened. We had a nice climax. Now we've got a new story to chase. What's going to happen to Sabine? Where is Ahsoka? This is a really smart way to end the episode and a very solid halfway point. We also killed Marok in this episode, and I think that was done much too soon. He was a very cool henchman. His secret identity was causing a lot of speculation, a lot of talk on the internet. I think a lot of people are going to lose interest now that that big plot point has turned out to be nothing. I am glad that it was not a big reveal. I've said before, it's okay to just let a cool henchman be a cool henchman, but the way they did him in this episode and how he goes out, it's just very underwhelming. His battle with Ahsoka and the simultaneous battle happening with Sabine and Shin, that was a really cool scene. Really good action, and then suddenly it ends abruptly and not satisfying. They clash blades a couple of times. It was a really cool fight scene, and then he starts doing this double-bladed lightsaber spin thing, which, just like everything about him, is cool as hell, and you're thinking, wow, where is this gonna go? How is she gonna counter this? This is gonna be such a cool whoop, one swipe, he's dead. Why even introduce this guy? The real truth is that I'm mad because I was going to do this big joke about his secret identity is actually Mark Hamill, because Marok is Mark with Ro, and I don't know how I was going to work in the Ro symbol. I was figuring that out, but now the joke is ruined. Thanks, Dave Filoni. I think what's bugging me about this episode and episode 3 is that I can see so much potential and how it's not really living up. This is going to sound weird, but I think they're putting the main characters in too much danger. Let me explain. Both main characters should have died multiple times at this point, but they keep surviving because of obvious plot armor. And that kind of makes the show a little boring because it lowers the stakes and it makes your villains look stupid because, well, they are stupid. I talked last episode about how they totally should have blown up Ahsoka's ship while it was floating powerless in space. They certainly should not have been flying feet from it trying to ram her.
You're dead, Bunny Bumpkin.
They had her dead to rights, and then somehow she returned? That's silly. And then you also have a giant hyper jump space ring that has huge laser cannons that only face one direction? Those things couldn't spin around and fire at the derelict ship floating in space?
You're dead, carrot face.
Sabine, of course, should be dead since episode 1 because of the lightsaber stab, and then Shin pulls it straight out instead of swiping it to the side, which would have cut her in half.
You're dead, Palm Girl.
Now in episode 4, there are multiple moments where Sabine and Ahsoka should have died, but once again, did not. For example, why just send an Inquisitor and a Padawan to track these two down? 2 on 2 is fair odds. Why not 3 on 2? Why would Baylan stay behind to guard the henge? For all we know, this planet is basically uninhabited. Sabine is also not holding her own against a seasoned Force user trained by a Jedi. That's not happening.
You're dead.
Shin would have killed her, plain and simple, no question about it. We have fully established at this point that Sabine is not using the Force. It even comes up in their fight, and she hasn't been keeping up with her sword training. She's dead.
Dead, dead, dead.
At one point, Shin force pushes Sabine into a tree, knocks her helmet off and her gun out of her hand. She's laying on the ground. Walk over and kill her. Done. Or when she throws smoke bombs down and Sabine can't see anything, throw a saber at her. It's over. She's dead.
You're dead, fluff butt.
But she doesn't. Probably because later on it's going to be revealed that she doesn't actually want to be a dark Jedi, and the power of female friendship is going to overcome all, and she and Sabine are going to be best buddies, despite us having zero indication that Shin is anything but a murder machine. We don't see any hesitation about her killing Sabine. She just doesn't. We also witnessed her killing an entire crew with ease. She's not death averse. None of this is making Sabine look good. It just lowers the threat of the show. Baylan does seem to kill Ahsoka, kicking her over the edge of a cliff, and I could see how his character would believe that she is dead. And honestly, she should be. Having her survive a fall like that is stupid. Putting a character in danger and showing how they think their way out, or skill their way out, or find their inner determination, or whatever. Those are all good things. Great way to build up a hero. Having them be completely outmatched and outmaneuvered, and yet just living because no one really decides to kill them, that is just weak. Now your villains have no threat whatsoever. Your show has no weight. If we look back at the original series, Lucas understood that. There were consequences. Luke loses a hand. Han is captured and frozen. Obi-Wan straight up dies. Speaking of Baylan, I am loving this villain, even though we haven't really seen him do too much. He's reserved, and he shows his intelligence by not just rushing into everything. Ray Stevenson delivered an incredible performance here. He just has such presence. He is nailing looking powerful without trying to look powerful, which is really hard to pull off. He's a villain that knows he's a villain, but he doesn't relish just murdering everyone. He doesn't want to kill Ahsoka since there are so few Jedi left. During their fight, he seems genuinely regretful when he tells her it didn't have to end this way. At one point when Morgan asks him, "Oh, do I detect fear in your voice?" he says, "No, it's just experience." I like that. After he does away with Ahsoka, he turns around to Sabine, calmly puts away the lightsaber, and begins manipulating her. This is a guy that really does have experience. He is in complete control of himself and his surroundings, and that is a terrifying villain. Honestly, they could have had Shin be a little more impulsive to contrast his experience and patience with her brash youth. That contrast would have improved the fighting between Shin and Sabine also. Shin appears calm and in control and really, really skilled, so having Sabine hold her own against her it's just silly. Now, if Shin had like a temper, it would be a little bit of a give and take because it looks dumb. I don't like characters with a temper, but it would have worked out for the fighting. Maybe she would overplay her hand. Maybe she would be too aggressive, go in too hard, leaving herself open for a counterattack or something that Sabine could exploit. I like Baylan's fighting style as well. I saw a lot of complaints about episode 1 that he barely moves his saber when he's deflecting the blasters on the ship, and in this episode we get a little bit of the same movement. I think this plays into his character though. He's a really big dude. His armor would suggest kind of a medieval knight thing. He wields his lightsaber like a greatsword. Baylan's obviously a strength build, That's fine. I'm more of a quality build person, but, you know, to each their own. He's not doing a ton of acrobatics and flashy moves. It's just pure power while he's swinging. Ahsoka is barely able to deflect some of these blows that he's delivering. I love the fact that they gave a lot of thought to his distinct fighting style and hers. Throughout the series, they've shown her changing up her stances, and I really like this detail. Sometimes she's got the two sabers, and she's very fluid and offensive. Other times, she's using both sabers in a very defensive fashion, like when she was fighting the Inquisitor and his droid. For most of this episode, she's wielding just the one in a very samurai fashion. Before the killing blow against Marok, she's got the two-handed overhead power stance while he's doing the spinning thing, and then the same thing with Baylan. When they're sizing each other up, we see her change her stance in response to his. That final battle between Ahsoka and Baylan was so well done. It made sense that they weren't just fighting to the death. They were fighting over that map. Ahsoka was trying to distract him or maneuver him away from the map so she could grab it. He had to be defensive and back her away while the calculations were being done. The fight had a purpose, and they did a great job of molding the choreography and all the action around the characters, keeping not just the fight in mind, but also this map objective. Also loved the scene with Huyang holding his own against an HK assassin droid. It would make perfect sense that Huyang has been training Jedi for 1,000 years. He's got tons of skills programmed, so it's perfectly sensical that he would be able to hold his own in a fight. He had some great moves. It was such a cool scene, and then in the end, he purposely shorts out the ship to give a warning signal. I'm loving this character. He's capable. He tells it like it is. He's the most mature person in the group. I also like the direction they took with Sabine, making the wrong choice, giving up the map. I think it was pretty obvious in the beginning episode that's what was going to happen, but I think it fits well with her character, and I like that direction. Like I said, this is a good halfway point, great ending to this episode. Looks like the bad guys have won, or at least they have a very solid upper hand. How will our heroes overcome this? Again, I think this probably should have been a 6-episode series. This would be a good halfway point if episodes 3 and 4 were just one. We would have had a really good story thus far. Overall, this is a good arc, and if a little more editing had been applied, this would flow really well. The episode ends with Ahsoka possibly being dead, with Anakin being there and telling her he didn't think she'd get here so soon. And that de-aging looked terrible, by the way. That transition from the cliff shoreline to her laying there in wherever she is in the afterlife, that was a really cool camera move. Like I said, this is a great way to end an episode. Is Ahsoka actually dead? What is Anakin doing here? What's going to happen to Sabine? Overall, the way this episode ended makes me want to find out more. Yes, getting through episode 3 was a chore, but here's the reward. Have you been watching Ahsoka? What are your thoughts at the halfway point? I appreciate you watching, and I'll see you next time.